I coach. A big part of my life, I guess, is coaching. Coach wheelchair track and road racing, and also women's basketball here at the university.
Well, I'm Catholic, I'm gay, I'm Italian, I'm talented, I have a big family.
I grew up in Colorado. I moved down here to Tucson to go to graduate school about 6 years ago. I'm in the PhD program in archaeology at the University of Arizona.
I'm 33. I'm a Native American, Pima Indian. I have a 14-year-old daughter, which sometimes, scares people sometimes, Her name is Jessica. She's the greatest. She's my life, and she means everything to me.
Yeah, well, not an injury, but it's a degenerative spine condition that happened when I was 7 years old.
The accident left me at a time. I was pretty badly hurt in a car accident. Left me weakened when a polio epidemic came by shortly after the accident. And so I was pretty vulnerable physically to that.
Right before my 15th birthday, I broke my neck in a car accident. So I'm a quadriplegic from that accident, and it's a permanent injury until they devise some way to repair spinal cords, which hopefully will be sooner than later.
I was hurt in 1987, May 3rd of 1987. I was in a motor vehicle accident that left me an incomplete quadriplegic, C5 and 6.
Before my disability, I was a lot shyer. I really didn't have any interest in athletics or anything of that nature. And so I don't know. I think if I wasn't disabled, and this can be kind of taken either way, but I think that I have more of a wider view of things, I think, because I have had to deal with a disability, and I think most people with disabilities can also share that same opinion, that they can see things a little bit more wider because they have to deal with these kind of experiences.
I played with my brother every day. He couldn't go somewhere unless he took his brother, so I was the drag along, and they would lose me. His friends would lose me. We'd play hide and seek, and I had to count to 1,000, or as high as I could, and they'd be gone. When I was after the disability, I had playmates, but mostly because my peers were more able-bodied. I found myself surrounded by either younger people or girls. I mean, they weren't going to do the same activity, so if we had a big summer-long Monopoly game, there were probably more girls playing the game than there were guys.
I was a big jock in school. I played all sports, football, basketball, baseball, track, But after my accident, it was just definitely, I understood, that it was going to be somewhat different, I wasn't going to be able to, do a lot of the things that I used to do. So, I was going to have to, retrain the brain. And so that's why I started going to school.
I was really into Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. I lifted a lot of weights. So I was really into the whole masculine body image thing that was going on in the mid-'80s, and I guess it's still going on, of course, now. So it took me a long time to become comfortable with my body image and stuff after the accident, because I was convinced that, a real man needs to be, tall, strong, needs to have big muscles, needs to be aggressive. And, after breaking my neck, of course, all the muscles atrophy below the level of injury, so I'm fairly scrawny little guy now. So it was really tough, and it is something I still deal with now, even though I'm completely aware of the male masculine stereotypes and how inaccurate they are. Yeah, I mean, my friends were into the same stuff that I was. We played a lot of sports. Mountain biking was probably my favorite activity. I played football. So, you know, in a typical day when my friends and I would do something for fun, it was very physical fun. We were out playing sports or, you know, hiking or running around. So it definitely made a difference in terms of my relationships with friends that I'd had before the accident.
You know, I was with 5 other people in that S10 Blazer, and I don't see them at all. Because I was sitting in the back seat with 2 of my friends, in the middle of 2 of my friends. And I was the only one that got thrown out of the automobile, and I was the only one that got hurt. Everybody else was in the automobile and, you know, got some scrapes and some bruises, and that was it. Yeah, right after the accident, yeah, you know, they were around, you know, yeah, you know, we're partners, you know, whatever you need, you know, I'll be there for you. And for about, I heard that for like maybe, a couple months, and then it just slowly started to fizzle away, you know. And then once I moved back into my folks' house, you know, I saw maybe one of them maybe once every other week. You know, he'd come by, you know, and maybe take me out, and we go, you know, hanging out, you know, and just cruising around the neighborhood, and then that kind of like fizzled out, you know. So it's unfortunate, you know. Well, not really. Well, at the time it did, you know, because I thought our relationship was, you know, a lot stronger than, you know, that we could, you know, still be partners and, you know, friends to the end type of thing. But it's like, you know, it's like that saying, you know, you definitely know who your friends are, you know, once, you know, your life or money comes into play, you know. And it's just unfortunate because I grew up with these people, you know, from kindergarten all the way up, you know, to high school. And for them to kind of like just say, you know, see ya, you know, that's kind of crappy, you know. But you know, I've got some good friends now, though. You know, I've got some really good friends now, you know, on my rugby team, and some friends that I know who are on the basketball team, and, you know, some friends at school. And that's important to me.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the interaction was, I was definitely more of the in-group before, and then there's definitely going to be an out-group because, you know, it just wasn't readily available to do the things that some of the other kids were doing. But one thing that's different than what they do now is back then, as far as like grade school, I mean, I still have my closest family and my friends at home, but in school back then, they would have you go right to the, I'm trying to remember what it was called, but they send you right to the disabled schools. They didn't integrate you right into the able-bodied schools right away, which I believe is what they do now. So when I was first injured, they actually sent me to a school with other disabled people. So it wasn't like, you know, everybody had some kind of form of disability. So that part was easy. I mean, it was pretty easy interacting with that kind of group. A couple years later, they started to integrate kids, you know, with disabilities into the mainstream schools, and then you kind of saw a little bit of a difference there because you had to kind of get in there and you know, make yourself more, you know, outgoing, because I mean, you know, that there was that kind of you know, you were different. You definitely stood out.
Older people gave off so much of what I thought of as wisdom in terms of how I could grow and get through what I'm going through. Young people had no experience with that. I was always after answers. And as a preteen, I was studying personalities. I immersed myself in the psychology of personalities, how they grow and change. I probably still have some of that collection of literature. And I began to work on myself to make me more acceptable, because my peers were too busy running with the pack to want to have somebody that couldn't run with them drag along. So it was, I found it necessary to make myself more desirable, more in demand than they were, and that would fulfill that void.
I'm sure it was really rough for them, you know, because I was not living home at the time, and you know, to get this call saying that their son's been in a motor vehicle accident, you know, I'm sure that was quite a shock. and then, you know, having to see me in that position, having to you know, somewhat remodel their home, you know, so that, you know, once I got out of the hospital, you know, I could live with them. You know, it was definitely a shock. You know, for a long time where I lived, you know, it was hard for myself to get, you know, kind of like, you know, a nurse to come out, you know, and give me a bath, you know, things like that, you know, and check blood pressures, things like that, you know. So my father did all that. My father became my nurse, you know, and I love him even more, you know, now than I did, you know. He's definitely helped me out, you know. He's definitely lifted me up off the floor, you know, if I fell out of my chair or out of my bed. You know, he was the one who's giving me, you know, the bed baths and checking, you know, my meds, my blood pressure, things like that, you know. He's just definitely been there for me, and, you know, so was my mother, but, you know, my mother was working at the time, and it was mostly my father who was home, and, you know, I just don't know how to, you know, tell him, you know, thanks, you know. I can only say it so much, you know. But he means everything to me, and he's just definitely been there, you know, and he still is.
I'm close to my sister and my mom. My sister moved down here to Tucson a couple of years ago because I was down here. She's younger than I am. She's about 4 years younger than I am. So she was pretty young when I got hurt and was pretty upset about the whole thing, but it didn't really, we always stayed close and it didn't really affect her relationship with me. She's a lot different than me. She talks a lot more about things and is more interested in facing conflict and talking about things rather than you know, just sort of letting things go. So she's different in that regard too. My relationship with my mom is a little different because she's very protective, and so she's very concerned about like my health and stuff all the time. You know, she's always calling me and finding out, well, is everything, you know, going fine? And you know, because she worries about me getting sick or something, or you know, having problems related to the disabilities.
Well, I have two older brothers, and I mean, they were very supportive at first when I was a kid, of course, and they, you know, they would do everything for me. But then after a while, they're like, you know, you can do this on your own, and that actually helped me out because it, you know, at first I mean, I could have been dependent on the family, and I think it, you know, I see this in some of the people that I interact with now who are new disabilities. The family can be really supportive, but then the person becomes dependent on that, and they never actually break out of their shell and actually become an independent person with a disability. And you know, I interact with people like that quite often, and you know, that's really unfortunate. You know, sometimes you want to really protect a person who's, you know, disabled if you're a parent, but you have to kind of let them get out there and experience, you know, the real world, because that's the way it's going to happen in the long run. And you see that where they've been protected and things like that. So fortunately, now I look back on it, you know, I had brothers that were kind of, you know, they were kind of mean. They're like, you know, go do your own thing. My mother was the same way. She was like, you know, we helped you at the beginning when you're new to it, but now you got to start going out and doing things on your own. And I think, you know, now today, that's definitely been a benefit to me.
Kate Smith was singing her famous God Bless America, and her show was over. We were all listening to the radio. My father said, I am out of cigarettes, and I was 5 years old, and I said, please, can I go? And formerly, he had never let me go. My older brother always went. And I jumped up and down and pleaded with him to please let me go, and I did, and I never came home. I was hit by a car on the way and recovered from that, and then paralyzed within months of that. So I lived with parents into their 90s who probably carried guilt. When I recognized as an adult the kind of guilt they must have carried for the condition I was in that my life took on, I realized their motivation for the kind of things they did for me. I mean, they were generous to me, and my brother had to work for everything. And I think that they were easing their guilt. What I can say is they spoiled the hell out of me in many ways. And when I realized as an adult how that was dangerous to my future, I began to work at unspoiling myself. And then when I married and raised a family, I had first-hand experience of which things enable a child to become lazy or complacent, and which things are challenging and nurturing. So I think working with the kids, working with my parents, and working with my children has given me a different kind of balance than if I had just had the children and not dealt with the parental side, or if I just had the parents and didn't have to deal with an offspring side. So I think my life has become more balanced because I had input or outtake from a generation above and a generation behind me.
She's very different than I am. She's very outgoing. She likes to talk about everything. She's very different than I am, which sometimes leads to conflict, but it's also been very good for me because she sort of, helped me move along in terms of my social relationships and being able to interact more with people in a relaxed fashion. So she was working at a store that I went into to buy something, and she actually just came up to me and said, if I give you my phone number, will you call me? And so I got her phone number and everything, and actually I ended up not calling her because I was too intimidated for, she's very pretty. So I thought, well, there's no way this is going to work out. So I actually didn't call her. She found my phone number from somebody that I had gone to high school with because she was telling her friend about me, that she had met me and everything. And the friend recognized me and then gave her my phone number, so she called me. So she was very persistent in terms of the relationship when I probably would have let it go.
I met this woman when I lived in Seattle. Well, actually, I met her mother first, and I found out she was divorced. And so I asked her mother permission if I could go ask her out. She said yes. We went out that Friday night, and we were like inseparable after that. I moved back to Arizona about a year later, and we had lost contact for a while. She sent me cards here and there, but it was just, I was still kind of like doing my own thing, and really didn't give a crap. And so finally it was like one day I had wrote her mother a birthday card. It was her birthday, and I had sent her a card and put my number on the bottom. And a couple days later they called me, and it was like, it was like nothing, it was like 4 years had not been passed. It was just like another day when I heard her voice, and it's been great ever since.
That's a romance at points. And I wouldn't say that I'm too different than most people. I think that if you're in a chair, though, this is just my own philosophy. I think for everybody, there's probably like 100 people that you're made for in the world, and you got to get out there and meet them. I think just if you are disabled, you got to just go a little bit. You got to search a little bit harder, because there are going to be people who are just going to be put off by your disability, where that's just not going to be what they're looking for, and so you got to try harder. You got to look more. You got to ask more people out. You got to really get out there. Otherwise, your numbers are definitely limited. I think if you are in a chair or you have a disability, but I think that if you're really looking for somebody who's going to be really solid, I think it's kind of be worth the search. You're looking for someone who's a little bit more grounded.
I was dated. It was it was imperative that I stay closeted. And so I always dated girls. No one would know that I had a gay component to my life. And I always dated girls, and I dated people who were fairly popular and accomplished, singers, dancers. I liked people who had either bright minds or great talents. And my wife of 30 years, and I had met in college, and we knew each other, and we dated in groups. And then when I moved west after graduation, we corresponded, and I continued to date people out here before I was married. And then in our correspondence, we began to get serious. We both picked up on that. And so we met a couple of times, either back there or Midway or in Arizona, and solidified a relationship. And then became engaged, and I went back to New York and was married.
It's going good. I mean, we fight like in any marriage. So, and the disability does cause some conflicts because I can't help as much with cleaning and so on around the house, and so she gets, angry sometimes because she has to do everything. But I do as much as I can around the house and everything. So it does cause, some conflicts.
Well, in dealing with, I was in a marriage in which my wife was very supportive of my disability. And I was far less disabled during that time, during the 30-year marriage. But as after I left that marriage, and I became more disabled, I looked for a situation where to make my life easier. And I met someone who was willing to help me do the grunt work in my life. And this person also had a disability, and so we seemed to have a blend, and we could fulfill each other's voids.
I think it's going just fine. I mean, I'm 28. I haven't been married or anything like that, but I'm happy with where I am, and I've heard things, and I've done research, in college too, about some of the relationship problems that disabled people have, but I really don't see it as like all doom and gloom. I see it as it's a challenge. You don't have as rich of a pool. All right, there's not as many fish in the sea for you, but you just have to get out there. You gotta let the bait sit in the water a little bit longer, and hopefully you'll get a bigger fish. And that's the way I kind of see it.
Well, what usually gets me through, just about anything is that it can always be worse. Your situation can always be worse than it is. I knew guys in the hospital who couldn't move their arms at all, so I would say to myself, you really don't have anything to whine about in terms of your disability or things that happen to you in your life, because, look at what else can happen, and look at other parts of the world where people are starving to death, whatever you want to call it, and then we whine about our little problems in our daily lives, but the truth is, most of the time it doesn't even compare to the suffering that somebody else is going through. So
well, my whole thing is that things are going to happen, and I think you kind of have to make the best of your situation, and that's what I try to do. Every day you wake up it's a new day, so you have a chance to start over, and that's what I think. When I get up in the morning, look, yesterday's done. Now what can I do about today? So people who are disabled, people who have things happen, just got to get out there and take on the day when the sun comes up.
you see me here sitting in this chair, you know, but as we talk, you know, hopefully you learned a little bit about me, you know, and that's what a lot of people don't see, you know. When I roll up to somebody, you know, it's just like, oh, you know, he's in a chair, you know, he's probably got, you know, maybe mental problems, or, you know, he can't maybe, you know, complete a sentence, or he's just basically in a chair, you know, and that's all they see. They don't see, you know, the real me, you know, you know, until they sit down, you know, with me, and then we can, you know, have a discussion, you know, and have them get to know me and just, you know, you know, okay, wait a minute, you know, there is more to him than just, you know, him rolling around in a chair.
Kid, when they said, you can't roller skate. Okay. I would stop roller skating, but it set up anger, resentment. And then at a later stage, when they said, you can't lift weights, I would go through the same grief processes. And when they said, you can't hike, you can't do this or that or the other thing, each time, those were activities that meant a lot to me. And each time I had to let go of something and go through the grief process, and then the growth, overcoming it, accepting it, it made me resilient. And I see that if I had not had difficulties in my life, I wouldn't have the resiliency today to overcome what might be coming my way as I leave this place. So I look at obstacles in my life, or any momentary tragedy, as something that may not be overcome today, but it can be overcome, hopefully in my lifetime.
Yeah, I have a right to be more upset than somebody else who doesn't have my problems, but, you know, then again, I just always consider that I am lucky in a lot of regards, so.
I like to be married, no kids, but yeah, I would like to, you know, at some point settle down. Hopefully I'm still coaching and doing what I'm doing now, but yeah, I definitely like to be married 10 years from now. I see that in the future.
I want to live life, you know. I don't want to have to worry about, you know, damn, you know, I'm stuck in a chair and all of that, you know, and I can't do this, and I can't, you know, I can't run again, you know, and I can't lift heavy objects, and oh, you know, poor Pete. No, I want people to understand that, you know, I was in an accident, you know, and I've accomplished a lot of stuff that, you know, I was told that I was never going to be able to do again, and that's what I want, you know, people to see, you know.
I won't let myself get down to the point of despairing as I used to. And it's not that I'm so rigid about it, it's that I know that there's hope and change somewhere along the way. Everything evolves, and this is going to pass too.